The Acolyte is truly one of the most hilarious disasters I've ever gotten to witness because you can tell there was not a single person on the set of this show that actually knew anything about Star Wars, and it was basically a $180 million flop. But now that the series is finally over, we've gotten the conclusion, it is getting absolutely destroyed for wrecking canon and all of the awful cameos that were supposed to be big nostalgia bait that ended up falling flat. I have a few things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, I've had to talk about the Acolyte quite a few times on the channel at this point, and every single time I physically cringe because I used to love Star Wars, but Disney Star Wars is just not good. There really hasn't been anything that's been amazing. We've gotten some decent pieces of content, in my opinion, like Rogue One, the beginning of The Mandalorian was solid, but we still haven't gotten anything that truly feels like 100% Star Wars. But now we have episode 8 finally releasing, and it is getting destroyed. This is a Forbes article by Eric Kane, one of the good journalists they actually have, but it says the Acolyte was a mess from start to finish, and Tuesday night's jumbled season finale only strengthens my belief that this was a show that needed about 3 more drafts before going into production. Everything about this show is rough and messy, and the 2 very fun cameos in the finale can't save it from itself. It says, I suppose we shouldn't be surprised that Osha goes to the dark side this episode and that May, by dint of losing her memory, goes over to the good guys. After all, Osha was wearing black by this point and May was in all white. How subtle. Then again, it's hard to tell who the good guys are anymore or who the bad guys are because the Acolyte is just so angsty and edgy. And I'm fine with like edgy content where you've got a lot of like gray characters that you don't particularly know where they stand, but they still have to have clear motivation and clear actions that they are making so you can understand them better. And that's really not happening here. We've got characters going back and forth, the dark side and the light side, the Jedi and the Sith, they're kind of conjumbled. You, again, don't really know where a lot of the characters actually stand, which is why I think it's so poorly executed, because the characters really don't have good or clear motivation, and they really didn't have kind of a point that they were trying to get to. They just were kind of existing and stumbling through the story. It's like a pantser actually decided to not go through several drafts of their writing. It says, though, the Acolyte seems hell-bent on portraying the Jedi in the worst possible light, and I might be able to accept it if it were just the cover-up at the end where Vernestra somewhat bizarrely pins all of the killings on Sol when she goes by the Senate tribunal. But this show wants very badly for us to think what the Jedi did on Brendok is some horrific crime when I'm right there with Sol. He was trying to protect children from what very much appeared to be a terrifying dark side witch cult. Now, big spoilers, they really thought that the Reylos were going to eat this up because you've got the 2 bad guys of the series, holding hands. At the end, there was a lot of like pent up angst throughout it, and you kind of had like this dark side relationship going on. It does not compare at all to other romances we've gotten in Star Wars like Padme and Anakin and Han and Leia. It's just not good at all whatsoever. But they really thought with this massive finale, they were going to draw people in and get them to be interested because one of the 2 major cameos was actually Yoda. He is the final shot that you see in the show, and it's like they're trying to bait the few fans that they've got to, tag Disney on social media and Lucasfilm going, please make a season 2, when clearly that's not going to happen. Leslie Headland has already said, like, listen, we put everything we had into season 1. We didn't expect a season 2, which definitely does not sound good, but there is actually another twist within the series. You see this ominous figure crawling out of a dirt-filled cave, and you end up finding out that it's Darth Plagueis. Out of all of the characters they could have had crawling out of a cave, and it's him. It just shows that these people know nothing about Star Wars and have completely disrespected the canon that exists now. Of course, we have seen so many retcons within this series. Here is just a short list. Anakin Skywalker wasn't the first child conceived by the Force. The Acolyte has introduced a new Sith Lord who really didn't fit into the canon. The Sith risked exposure long before the Phantom Menace. Why did the Sith emerge from the shadows? We'll never know. Star Wars has confirmed how Acolytes fit into the rule of two. Acolytes are an important part of the Star Wars mythology. And then, of course, by the end, the rule of two really was, I'd say, kind of the highlight of the series, which could have been fine if, again, it was well written and you actually cared about these characters. We know that now Wookiees can be Jedi Masters, even though previously George Lucas said that that wasn't the case. And then we had them completely trashing Ki Adimundi's story and forgetting his age and also the dialogue he had in previous movies. So you just have like a plethora of problems with this show, and the user scores really reflect how unhappy people are. It actually has gone up a little bit since, episode 2 and 3. It kind of settled at a 13%, but now it's up to a whopping 15%. And honestly, I think that that is a fair score. There really is nothing here that feels like Star Wars or that feels like these people cared about this franchise and were passionate. It just seems like ultimately they were hired because Disney thought that they were going to be able to make a series that was going to make them money, and that really hasn't happened. I mean, we are seeing them throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars to billions of dollars on products that are absolute failures, and it's just so sad to see the absolute state of Star Wars at this point. I don't see a way that they could fix it or that they could change the direction that they've been heading in. I just don't see an easy way for them to course correct at this point, and we are going to continue to see really bad series like The Acolyte. Now, again, Leslie Headland has basically said that a season 2 is not in the works. They haven't even really talked about it, so it will be interesting to see if she can scrape together a team for it, present it to Disney, and they ultimately decide to greenlight it. I don't think they're going to do that, judging by the negative reactions to this series on social media from, X to YouTube, and also judging by these audience scores. They do sometimes still greenlight things even when they have bad audience scores initially, because the critics love it. As you can see, an 80% is a very high praise for a series this awful, at least in my opinion. And with all of these changes, it just is irredeemable at this point. Over the past few weeks, we've already seen people like Leslie Headland going into interviews and calling us racists for criticizing this series and not instantly loving it. And judging by the reaction to this final episode and how upset people really are, I don't think that she's going to go into any more interviews and talk about her experience. I think that the press tour is over and they're not going to have her say really anything else about this show. But of course, I will be keeping my eye on the team's social media to see if any of them actually decide to continue to attack fans. But The Acolyte is finally over, and it was a massive failure for Lucasfilm and Leslie Headland. But that's all that I had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.